Hey, welcome to Bible class. I'm so glad that you're with us again today as we continue looking at Noah and the flood. You remember last week we looked at how that God had told Noah to build an ark. Now before we begin this week's lesson, I want to remind you and invite you to be with us at the Main Street Church of Christ in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. We meet each Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And if you'll notice right here, this is just a little reminder of where we are, right on Main Street, at the Main Street Church of Christ in Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. Now, I have a very special announcement right now. If you've been watching my class and you attend there at Main Street, or just even if you visit, we invite you to be there with us, particularly next Sunday, because next Sunday I'm going to have a little Christmas surprise for all the kids at church. And so basically you just come next Sunday and I will have a special surprise right out in the foyer of the church building. So be sure that you have your parents bring you, and there'll be a little special surprise for all of our kids at church. And so just want to tell you Merry Christmas and hope you'll be there. Now let's begin with our Bible class. You remember last week we had our memory verse from Genesis chapter 6 and verse 8. You remember? It said, "But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord." Now, last week we talked about how wicked the earth had become and how much people were thinking about bad things all the time. You remember the Bible said that the thoughts and intents of their heart had become evil continually. They were all the time thinking about bad things. They were doing bad things. And so God said, we can't let this go on. I'm going to destroy the entire world. But it says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. In other words, he says Noah is a good man who's trying to do good things. He is a righteous man. And that's the kind of person we want to be. We want to be like Noah. Now, of course, the Bible tells us that Noah, when God came to him to tell him about building the ark and about the flood coming, Noah was at that time about 500 years old. 500 years old. Do you know anybody who's 500 years old? I don't. Matter of fact, people today don't live to be 500 years old. It's unusual for someone to live to be 100 years old. But Noah was 500 years old when God came to him and says, Noah, I'm going to flood the earth. I'm going to destroy everything that has breath of life in it. That is everything that breathes air. He says, but I want to save you and your family in this ark. Now, let's continue on with our lesson in Genesis chapter 6. We'll notice that last week God told Noah how to build the ark. You recall he told him what kind of wood to use. He said, I want you to use gopher wood. He told him how big to make it. He says, make it 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. That's a really big boat. As a matter of fact, that's probably the largest wooden boat ever constructed. But God says, this is how big I want you to make it. Told him the wood to use was gopher wood. He told him, I want you to have 3 levels in it, the first, second, and third floor. I want you to have 1 door and 1 window, and I want you to put pitch, that is kind of like a tar substance, on the inside and the outside. In other words, God says to Noah, you're going to make the perfect floating life raft for all the creatures of the earth that have the breath of life in them. In other words, anything that breathes air is going to be on the boat with you. And so Noah and his wife, his 3 sons and their wives, so a total of 8 people were going to be on the ark. Now, think about this. Had Noah ever seen rain? Many people don't think that Noah had ever seen rain, didn't even know what a flood was. This is something that's very unusual. In the book of Genesis chapter 2, when we were studying about the creation in the Garden of Eden, in Genesis chapter 2, God talks about some things that the way the Garden of Eden was. And it says in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 5, it says, "For the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground." Now, we don't know at the time of Noah whether Noah had ever seen rain. Now, we do know that Noah had never seen a flood like the flood that was going to be coming. We know this from the book of Hebrews. In Hebrews chapter 11, when it talks about the faith of Noah, and this is one of my favorite chapters in the whole Bible, in Hebrews chapter 11. In Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 7, you'll notice it says, "By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark by which he condemned the world and became the heir of righteousness, which is according to faith." So it tells us Noah was being warned of things that had not yet been seen. Now, whether that means Noah had never seen rain, or whether it means Noah had never seen a flood like the worldwide flood that God was going to bring, either way, Noah had no idea what God was talking about. He had never seen anything like that. Now, imagine if someone told you to do something and you were like, "Wait a minute now, I've never heard of this. This is unusual. This is different. I don't know what you're talking about." Noah didn't know what God was talking about. Noah had no idea about this flood. But in Genesis chapter 6, you recall that when God is talking to Noah, down in verse 13, God tells Noah why he's going to destroy the earth. He says, because it's become filled with violence and people are evil, so God's going to destroy it. He says, "But I want you to make an ark of gopher wood." Then we'll go on down, and he says in verse 17, it says, "And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters on the earth, to destroy from under heaven all flesh in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds after their kind, of the animals after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind, 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive." Now, God is telling Noah what his ark is going to be used for. You'll notice he says also in verse 21 and 22, he says, "And you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them." So on this ark, this really big, really big wooden boat, is going to be 8 people: Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. 8 people are going to be on this boat. But not just 8 people, but 2 of every kind of bird, every kind of animal, every kind of creeping thing. That means like snakes and spiders and things like that. These creeping things. All of those are going to be on this ark, as well as all the food for all of them. So the question is, Noah, did you do it? Did you follow what God said? Well, in verse 22, it says, "Thus Noah did. According to all that God commanded him, so he did." Now in Hebrews chapter 11, remember we just read about Noah by faith, how that Noah by faith was saved. It says, "By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household." Noah did everything God told him to do, and he did it exactly how God told him to do it. Noah was a good man. Noah was a righteous man. You see, when we do things that God tells us to do and how he tells us to do it, that makes us good and righteous. That's exactly the kind of people we want to be. We don't want to be people who do bad things and think bad things and say bad things. We want to be like Noah. Now, the Bible does tell us that Noah did save his entire household. We see this in both 1 Peter and 2 Peter. Peter mentions about Noah and how that he saved him. So, how long did it take Noah to build the ark? Well, you remember, we looked at Noah was 500 years old when he began the ark. That's when God first came to him and told him, you need to build this ark. And then, how old was Noah when he went into the ark? Well, in Genesis chapter 7, we read how old Noah was. In chapter 7 and verse 6 of Genesis, it says, Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters were on the earth. Wow. Noah was 600 years old. So it took Noah 100 years to build the ark and do it exactly as God told him to do it. Now, in 100 years, Noah could certainly build the ark. He had the help of his 3 sons, and he had 100 years to do it. And no doubt he had help from God in telling him everything he needed to do. So Noah did this. And then the Bible tells us in chapter 7, beginning in verse 1, what happened when the floods started to come. It says, then the Lord said to Noah, it's time to come into the ark. Come into the ark, you and your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. You shall take with you by 7s each clean animal, a male and his female, 2 of each animals that are unclean, a male and his female. And also by 7s each of the birds of the air, male and female, to keep the species alive on the face of all the earth. For after 7 more days I will cause it to rain on the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things that I have made. And Noah did according to all that the Lord had commanded him. And so Noah did this, and it tells us on down in that same passage, or on down in that same chapter in verse 9, it tells us that all these animals went into the ark. It says they went in 2 by 2. Now, I mentioned a couple weeks ago that we're going to learn a song about Noah. And there are actually a few songs that I know about Noah, but one of them I would like to do with you is called Good Old Noah. And of course, Noah was a good and old man. He was 600 years old when he went into the ark. He was 500 years old when he started building the ark. So let's try this together. I'll do a little bit, and you try it as well. We'll try it through a couple times. Good old Noah built the ark like God told him to, and on that ark he put 2 pigs like God told him to, with an oink oink here and an oink oink there, here an oink, there an oink, everywhere an oink oink. Good old Noah built the ark like God told him to. Now, you know, we can put any animal we want to because God put all the animals on the ark. Do you think you can do it with me again? But this time we're going to let's do an animal like, how about an animal that you might have at home? A dog. Let's try that one. Good old Noah built the ark like God told him to, and on that ark he put 2 dogs like God told him to, with a woof woof here and a woof woof there, here a woof, there a woof, everywhere a woof woof. Good old Noah built the ark like God told him to. Now we can do that with all kinds of animals. One of my favorites is an animal that you probably like too. You ready? Good old Noah built the ark like God told him to, and on that ark he put 2 deer like God told him to, with a here and a there, here a there a. Good old Noah built the ark like God told him to. You see, and you can do this with any animal you can think of, whether it be an armadillo, an aardvark, or maybe, I don't know, think of an animal that you might think of. Maybe a zebra. I don't know. Maybe a horse. Maybe a cow. Maybe a snake. We could do it with all of those animals. Noah did exactly what God told him to do. When God came to Noah and he says, Noah, the earth is so bad, I'm going to destroy it, but I'm going to save you and your wife, your 3 sons and their wives, and you're going to do this for me. It took 100 years for Noah to build the ark. And Noah did, just like God said. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The perfect floating device to save all of the creatures of the earth. And Noah did it. He did it by faith because he was a good man and a righteous man. So I want to encourage you to be like Noah. When God says to do something, and he always tells us in this book right here, we know what this book is, don't we? I'll bet you probably know a song about this book. You remember this one? Oh, the Bible, yes, that's the book for me. I'll read and study and then obey the Bible. Bible. Oh, the Bible, I'll take it home with me. I'll read and study and then obey the Bible. I don't know about you, but I really like my Bible. Your Bible may look a little bit different than mine, but when we read in the Bible, we read about Noah in Genesis chapter 6 and chapter 7. And next week we're going to notice what happens when Noah's on the ark and when Noah gets off of the ark. Because eventually Noah does get off the ark. Now you've probably seen a flood before. You've probably seen lots of rain before. But I can guarantee you've never seen anything like Noah saw. Matter of fact, God said that when Noah gets off the ark, he tells Noah, I'll never destroy the earth this way again. Now I want you to remember our memory verse from last week. That is very important. Genesis chapter 6 and verse 8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. That's going to be our same memory verse for this week. And so next week we're going to look at the rest of chapter 7 and also some of chapter 8 as well, when we look at God's deliverance of Noah. We're going to notice how long Noah was on the ark with all the rain and all the flooding all over the earth. And we're going to notice what happens when Noah gets off the ark. So I want you to join me next week as we continue looking at Noah and the flood from Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8. So I'll see you next week. And remember, this coming Sunday, I don't remember exactly what day it is. I want to say it's the 20th or the 21st. I don't know. Whatever it is. Next Sunday, I want you to come and see me. And if you don't see me, I will have them out in the foyer. I'll have a little special surprise for all of our students, all of our young scholars who are studying the Bible with me via the internet. So next week, I want you to come out and see me. And if you don't get to see me, at least have your parents stop in at the foyer next Sunday, pick up a little special Christmas surprise. And so next week, we're going to continue looking at Noah. So I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.